Once upon a time, a guy named Adam Andrews told a bunch of people on the internet about folklore-inspired villains. This is Top 10 Nerd, and today it's the top 10 Marvel villains inspired by folklore. Number 10, Mephisto. The devil, Satan, Lord of Hell. It's almost unfair to cover Mephisto on this list, as he can technically cover a wide range of different biblical, folklore, and mythological characters. Essentially, he is Marvel's devil, but not really. And his whole shtick is making deals, but usually of the unfair variety. We see this happen all the time in folklore. Characters making deals with the devil that ultimately end up costing them more than they bargained for, or even making deals that make you give up your soul and everything that makes you happy. The thing with this character is that while he calls his pocket dimension hell, it's not. He just calls it that, and he looks the way he does to make it easier for him to exploit the people he is ensnaring in his traps. He isn't actually Lucifer or the devil, just a pretty bad and admittedly pretty powerful interdimensional demon who likes tricking people. So, if you're going to learn anything from this character, it better be to read the fine print and think carefully before you agree to anything. Number 9, Dracula. Dracula from Marvel Comics versus his literary and folklore iterations have quite a few key differences, but the main similarity is they're all the same. They are vampires, and they'll ruin your day. Originally the Transylvanian and specifically Wallachian ruler Vlad the Impaler, he turned himself into a vampire following a battle with the invading Ottoman Empire, seeking revenge and the power to destroy his enemies in the comics. While the real Vlad the Impaler was an actual person, he wasn't a vampire. At least as far as we know. But he was an incredibly brutal person, which you shouldn't be surprised by because of the whole impaler thing. The character he inspired, however, is considered to be both the prototypical and the archetypal vampire, and most of the elements and abilities that character possesses are shared by his comic book counterpart. Currently in the comics, he and his followers slash family, or whatever you want to call them, are hanging out in Chernobyl, trying to create a whole nation of vampires. Spooky! Number 8. Father Time. Father Time is kind of a hard folklore character to pin down. More modern iterations kind of see him showing up around New Year's to hand off the year, but he shows up in Greek and Roman mythology as various spellings of Kronos or Saturn, and he almost always wielded a sickle or a scythe, sometimes even being closely related to death. Now, switching over to the comics, he shows up equally as infrequently, but is an Elder of the Universe. Now, as an Elder of the Universe, you'd think he'd be pretty damn powerful, but he got beaten by Captain America, a peak athletic human dude, when he tried to place Cap into stasis alongside some other American folklore figures like Uncle Sam and Paul Bunyan. The second time he showed up was actually fairly recently, after Secret Wars, when the Elders of the Universe had a contest of champions, and he did equally as bad there. So yeah, do better, dude. Number 7, Dario Agger. You may be familiar with the myth of the Minotaur, the monster from the Greek island of Crete that had the body of a man and the head of a bull, born from Pasiphae, the wife of King Minos, and a snow-white bull sent by the god Poseidon. Well, Marvel has their very own, but don't worry, there's no weird bull-on-queen action here, which is good. Instead, Dario Agger was a rich Greek kid whose parents were slain by pirates. He ran away into a labyrinthian cave, prayed to a bull statue, and received the ability to transform into a minotaur. Agger then captured and rather violently ended the pirates before embarking on a quest to become as wealthy and powerful as possible, which he did. What an underdog, am I right? Agger eventually became CEO of Roxxon, which is not a good company, and what do you know, he made them even worse. Roxxon started mining operations in a bunch of the 9 realms, which brought Agger into conflict with Asgard and both Thor Odin's son and Jane Foster Thor. As a Minotaur, Agger was a match for each of them, and he even put up a pretty good fight against the Hulk. Not bad for an evil uber-rich CEO. Good job, dude. Number 6, Morganna Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay, or Morganna Le Fay, is one of the main figures in Arthurian legend, but with most things that have to do with King Arthur, there are a few different versions. Usually she appears as his sister and as an enchantress. She's also been a witch or a goddess, and also as Arthur's protector and savior. And sometimes she can be be both good and evil. It's kind of hard to nail this one down too, to be perfectly honest. In the comics, it's equally, sort of, as confusing, with her originating on the island of Avalon that used to be part of Atlantis. And then she ended up on England and is the half-sister of King Arthur and the student of Merlin. And once England started going Christian, she was not about it and became an adversary to her brother, doing battle with the Black Knight quite a bit. She is very smart, very powerful with magic, and she is almost always a bad guy. Number 5, the Great Old Ones. To call these beings villains is kind of a huge oversimplification. Also, saying that they are inspired by folklore is a bit of a fib, as they actually were inspired technically by the writings of author H.P. Lovecraft. But the sense of cosmic dread, horror, and mystery was much larger than the pages in that book, and many spin-off tales have come from those writings, including Marvel's own version. They took the madness creating elder gods and put their own twist on them. The individuals who make up this group are not all known, but among their strongest are Chthon and Shuma-Gorath, who both appear in the comics multiple different times and are incredibly powerful. Like, destroy all you love and hold dear kind of powerful. Lots of eyes, lots of tentacles, lots of dark magic, lots of madness. It's a great time. Number 4, the Chaos King. The Chaos King in Marvel Comics is a primordial being who represents the void that existed before the universe began, and was once imprisoned by the Amatsu Kami, only to re-emerge in the modern age. He had a huge, pretty awesome story arc where he clashed with Hercules, which thankfully resulted in him being beaten back by a god squad of mythological superheroes led by an incredibly powered up Hercules. But this was after the Chaos King had already destroyed almost the whole universe. So yeah, he's extremely strong. But funnily enough, the real world mythological Shinto figure known as Amatsu Mikobashi, and alternatively as the Chaos King and the Dread Star of Heaven, according to Japanese mythology, turned against the other gods in heaven and tried to conquer it at some point, but was beaten into submission. That's kind of all we really know about him. He didn't get too far in his conquest, and Hercules did not need to come save them. And now you know, and knowing is half the battle. Number 3, Wendigo. This character from North American folklore seems to be resurfacing a lot more in our modern day TV, books, games, and comics, and for good reason too. The idea of this monster is pretty scary. The Wendigo is big, foul-smelling, and absolutely not something you'd ever want to encounter in the wild. Created by a curse that is inflicted upon someone who commits cannibalism. In Marvel Comics, however, that curse specifically applies to the Canadian wilderness, and the surprising thing is that this curse has actually occurred quite a bit in the comics. Wendigo run into characters from the Hulk to Wolverine, who are then forced to deal with the big, hairy, strong monsters, although they are usually mainly a problem for Canadian heroes like Alpha Flight. There was one instance, however, where a bunch of Wendigos kinda laid siege to Vegas, so that's interesting. Number 2, Nightmare. The master of subconscious, the lord of dreams, Nightmare is an entity surrounded by mystery and superstition. Folktales say he is the spirit of slumber who rides on a horse made of shadows and hellfire. Some tales say he holds the hallowed skulls of deceased people and stores the fear of his victims to power himself up. Some say he rides a chariot made of bones drawn by 2 large bat-winged hooved creatures with piercing red eyes, snakes for tails, and dog heads with curled goat horns. In Marvel Comics though, he is a demon lord and ruler of the Nightmare Dimension, which is his little slice of the Dream Dimension. He is constantly trying to trap people and even the world in his Nightmare Dimension, where he is basically all powerful. Or he's trying to escape his dimension, but he almost always fails in his schemes, which we can largely thank Doctor Strange for. Thank you. Number 1, Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is a witch from Slavic folklore who lives in a magical hut in the forest and either helps, imprisons, or eats those she encounters. It can go any which way really, she's kind of like fickle about it. She is arguably among the most famous figures from Slavic folktales. In Marvel Comics though, Baba Yaga was the Russian goddess of earth, witchcraft, and misfortune, while also being the Russian folklore witch. She would usually survive feasting on travelers who wandered through her forest or resided in the house above her underground lair, 2 of which being Captain Britain and his girlfriend at the time, Megan, or however you want to pronounce her name. She doesn't show up all too much, but when she does, it's always freaky and she kinda always loses, which, I mean, she's a bad guy, I don't know what you expected. And they lived not so happily ever after. The end. So, what did you think? Any villains you wish made the list? Well, you know what to do. Leave it in the comments. Smack those like and subscribe buttons too while you're here. We at Top 10 Nerds sure would appreciate it. I've been your host, Adam Andrews, and until next time, thanks for watching, and peace out, nerds.